As a researcher, of course, there are more conventional and laid down methodologies for research. But when you're thinking about policy practice and your job is to actually inform policy in some way and inform a policy question in some way, then it's really important to have multiple perspectives on board. And I think their communication comes in both in terms of being able to collate those perspectives and get them, and in terms of being able to then communicate them back to the stakeholders who are going to be either taking decisions or who are going to be absorbing the information that's required.
Welcome to Shaping Cities. In this podcast brought to you by City Collab, we spotlight the practice of communication in city planning and development and its vital role in bridging ideas with action. Today, we are excited to chat with Mukta Naik, a public policy researcher whose work focuses on the intersections of urban housing, livelihoods, and internal migration. Mukta's 20-year career journey spans participatory design, research, policy advisory, and advocacy. She's worked with all kinds of change makers, government officials, design experts, academics, and community leaders to find ways to make cities more fair and just. From reimagining housing policies to crafting impactful livelihood programs and shedding light on the stories of internal migration, Mukta's work reminds us that cities are first and foremost about people. Mukta also has a personal blog where she shares her perspective and reflection on cities, art, community, and everyday joys. I really look forward to this conversation. Let's dive in. Welcome, Mukta, to Shaping Cities.
Thank you so much, Vani. Really excited to be here.
Thank you so much. Okay, so my first question, Mukta, is how would you define urban policy practice, particularly in the context of India? And also, how does it, what makes it unique from other urban development fields like urban design or urban planning?
I'm not sure it's very different, but basically in policy, we end up dealing with the wicked problems. So it's not just that these problems have a technical side as well as a social side, and you have to sort of balance both. But then you also have to think about the governance context, the institutional context, and oftentimes there is no solution, which is sort of right in front of you. So they're wicked because, different people have different perceptions of how to fix a problem. So you're always um, in a murky place. There's no tech fix that you can really have for a policy problem. Also, it's different because there's no winner. I mean, it's always in process, and it's slow, and it's long term. So oftentimes in urban design and architecture projects or planning projects, you start something and it finishes, maybe with different time horizons. But with policy, I think the problem endures for much longer than even sometimes the lifetime of a practitioner.
Give us an example of what might be a problem that will be situated in the realm of urban policy.
Sure. So I'll speak about two sort of issues that I've worked on most of my career. So first is affordable housing. How do you provide housing, or how do you create housing opportunities for those who are low income? And the second is the question of migration. And both these issues are now global policy issues. Pretty much every country in the world you can think of is facing, mired in a political debate around immigrants and mired in a political debate around housing, especially where urbanization is very significant. So these problems, the solutions have come and gone. There have been eras in which people were giving land to poor people. There's been other phases in which you built brought in the private sector to build mass housing. There's been an earlier era in which the government built mass housing. Solutions came and went, but the problem sort of persists. So that's a perfect example of a sort of enduring policy problem that you have to keep coming at it over and over with different philosophies and different attitudes and
And
contexts.
probably the nature of these problems change and shift over years, right? So it's like you said, it's the problem is
Yeah, I mean, the nuances change.
nuances change.
Yeah, the nuances change. Sometimes actually the problem in the essence remains exactly the same, but yes, the nuances, the contexts, the stakeholders may shift from time to time.
So I think you've worked on field, Mukta. You have done so in the sense. I think you started your career with participatory design. So you've worked on field. You've also worked on field as a researcher, where you've done a lot of qualitative kind of research in the field. Even I think at CPR and currently in your current position and your roles, you also rely a lot on people communication and looking at how do you kind of concise that research and bring it forward to different decision makers. So what are the types of what does a day for a policy practitioner or research look like, when you're in urban policy, what are you really doing, right? In the sense of on an everyday, what are the kind of tools you're using, and how do you think communication fits into that, right? So how communication is a part of an everyday life of a policy practitioner or a researcher.
I think first of all, you need to listen to and tune into different points of view when you are a policy practitioner. As a researcher, of course, there are more conventional and laid down methodologies for research, and you use it to the best to the question. I mean, use it in ways that suits best the questions that you're asking. But when you're thinking about policy practice, and your job is to actually inform policy in some way and inform a policy question in some way, then it's really important to have multiple perspectives on board. And I think their communication comes in both in terms of being able to collate those perspective and get them, and in terms of being able to then communicate them back to the stakeholders who are going to be either taking decisions or who are going to be absorbing the information that's required. So, for participative planning, for instance, I mean, I worked on a slum redevelopment project, and this was, Rajiv Awas Yojana project, and this particular scheme had a very major emphasis on participative processes and consensus building, and you had to get actually a 70% sign off from the community before you could take a project forward. And that really taught me a lot in terms of a field communication. So there are different stakeholders. You can't leave one set of, it's not as simple as going there and saying, hey, let's do focus group discussions, let's have 3 community meetings, let's present our designs, and then let's move forward. It's much more than that, because there are stakeholders who get left out of the standard ways and means of doing it. And we discovered it, of course, in an interesting way, because we were kind of sort of kidnapped by the youngsters in the community, and taken on bikes saying that we want to show you something. And they actually, this was a slum area, and they actually took us to a middle class housing and said, this is the kind of housing we want to live in, which was basically a 4-5 story middle class, a little bit more gated and organized complex. And that really gave us a sense of how we had completely overlooked one set of perspectives. So I think their communication comes in terms of being able to interact with very different people on site, be able to come without your biases. I mean, keep your own personal biases and your training that says that this is how community consultation should be held, or this is your output, your planning output, or your design output, or your policy paper output. And so you should just follow that process and actually be open to completely new perspectives. So I think being attentive towards the communication sides allows you to then take in these different perspectives and address them in your work.
And I think there you're trying to build a larger support around the issue or an agenda. But I think you also said that a lot of work is really behind the doors, work meetings. So how do you think, communication plugs in into these two very important aspects of practicing policy? That it does have a public facing, a public face to it, and but then a lot of real work also happens slowly, probably, behind the doors, making the right arguments with the right people, pushing the agenda. So, any examples from maybe your journey of how these two complementary strategies also work?
Yeah, I think there are two dualities that I'd like to address, which have been very which has been a huge learning experience and something to chew on for myself. The first is, while working with this large group of people on the Maybe Delhi campaign, which was basically a campaign to bring the people's voices to the making of the master plan in Delhi. So the duality there is expert versus non-expert, and it's something we come across so much in our field. And there, really, the whole exercise was to disband this duality. And I reading the room, making space for people who are not confident to speak, learning to talk in languages that are not overly jargonized and technical, uh, all of that. So that's one duality. So oftentimes in policy practice, you have to dismantle that duality, and then you have to put it back together again, because the forms in which policy accepts information is again full of jargon and full of technical terminology. So this question of breaking it down and then putting it back together again was fascinating for me. And it was particularly fascinating because in the process, a lot of community folks, representatives from worker collectives, basti federations, unions of domestic workers, I mean, these are the kind of people who were engaged with us, and they learned to talk this language. They may not be able to always use every term correctly, but they could really understand. So, and we learned that there's an innate a knowledge that comes from lived experience that we often just do not take into account. So creating an enabling environment for two-way communication, or very very free flowing communication, really helped us all sort of grow in the process. And then coming to your point, that a lot of policy work is about getting diverse words on the table, but it's not just about having convenings. We've all, I'm sure we all familiar with this. We have exhaustion with webinars and roundtables and consultations and meetings, but a lot of one-on-one conversations are also happening. So if you do need to get people together or rally together behind a particular point, say a group of people, an organization, a policy oriented NGO is working in a city, trying to propagate cycle paths. Say, take that as an example. And if the NGO is collating a group of citizens to go and speak to the police commissioner or to the municipal commissioner or to the development authority, they're not just calling on random people to go there, right? They have to then speak with each one of them and do all the one-on-one conversations that ensures that people know why they are there and what they are required to say when they are in that room. So I think, and it's not as transactional as that. I mean, I'm making this particular example sound transactional for the purposes of illustration, but over a career, you learn who are your allies, and you learn that you can't always work with allies. And so if you're working with people who you don't know very well, then you need to have many conversations before you're comfortable enough to take forward conversations or bring those people to tables where they are going to influence a policy conversation. So there is a lot of work that is invisible in policy. It's networks, it's friendships, it's people you meet in those big meeting and roundtable rooms with whom you then connect one on one. And it's about learning people's sensibilities. It's about also being very sensitive to their ethics. So, like I was telling a colleague the other day, if you're working in a government organization and writing a policy memo or a report, then who do you cite? There's also something that is a political question that you need to ask yourself. If you're going to cite, say, an activist group that has a very public sort of disagreement with the policies of the government under which you're working, then you shouldn't be citing their report, because it will raise a question on whose material is informing the worldview when you're writing this policy memo. So it gets quite detailed when you do policy work, and you have to be quite alert to the sensitivities of the folks involved as well.
So Mukta, I think you started with that, especially one of the core, aspects of our work and work of policy practitioners to ensure that we have diverse views and they're represented. And part of that process is dismantling those barriers or communication barriers, finding a common language. Also, you said, being strategic. Who do you want to, kind of nominate as the voice of people, because I mean we have just such diverse population, so all those all that thinking, prepping some of people to speak the same language as decision makers, etc. So that's the aspect of how do we get inclusive, how do we get true representation. After a point, I think it's also about how do you push the policy agenda forward, right, in the direction of making it into a endorsed, let's say a government endorsed policy or a government endorsed regulation or a law, right? And that's the entire process which completes the loop, that you find the right voices, you shape the agenda, and then you also take it forward. In your working with decision makers, I think both bureaucrats and probably elected representatives, uh, what are the communication techniques, tools that you found to be most useful and helpful? That how do you what is the language that is useful, what are the techniques that are useful when we are working with senior decision makers, or even elected representatives at different levels?
So there is a, again, like I said, you have to keep the sensibilities and the background of the person in mind. It always helps to research and understand what this person has done before, what their education is, where they've worked before, because they come with all, we must remember that they come with prior knowledge and perceptions. It's all, I always also try to talk to people who've worked with these bureaucrats or decision elected
Yeah,
representatives before. If you work through community, you know, because they have had previous experiences with approaching them, and they kind of have a sense of what the reactions will be. But really, I mean, presenting what your demands are right up front in very clear language, or presenting basically what is your ask. These are people who are pressed for time, so you have to put your ask very, very clearly right in front. With It helps to use with bureaucrats, especially dispassionate language, clear. When I say dispassionate, I don't mean you have to strip it of all your what your passion, in the sense of what you've brought to the table. But yes, it's not an emotional conversation that they're looking for. They're looking for a factual conversation, but there is a content of there is a certain amount of convincing that you do need to do. So one chooses a balance between rational and evidence based language and the kind of triggers that would be emotive for a decision maker. I think it does help to pick up on issues that that particular bureaucrat or decision maker has already been engaged and working on. If you're taking a completely new set of issues, then it requires a different level of preparation, and you probably need a lot of backing evidence. So maybe reports you've done, things you've written before, or other people have written before. So it what I'm trying to say essentially is that there's a lot of preparation, but when you go in the room, you probably have just those 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 15 minutes of attention. So what you choose to bring to the table has to be a very, very considered decision. And this is
absolutely.
something that everybody navigates in their own way, of course. Yeah.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think the work begins with with persuasion, convincing. I think that's the thing. I think you have to get people to at least see the value, see the agenda. And like you said, I think it's a balance of reason, rationale, data, evidence, but also what is the emotional connect that you want to bring forward. So I
I
think
I also wanted to say that it's not a one shot. I mean, it's not like you get that one shot with one person, right?
for
I mean, these
sure,
are people you cultivate a relationship with. So if you know that you are in a position where you may have access to this person several times, or at least 3 or 4 times, then you also think temporally. If it's the first time, then perhaps your objective is to create enough curiosity for them to
right.
want to see you another time. So you also have to, I mean, you cannot land the whole world's information about a complex issue on someone's table in one go. So, slow release is also a good
Sorry,
strategy
I think it
sometimes.
also brings us back to the first question, because when we are practicing as urban designers, it's about that one presentation and getting that project, right? And often the projects are different. You are, you're getting that project, it gets into execution. But I think, like you said, it's a very long, slow process. You have to build trust. You have to build those relationships, and then slowly navigate. And the change is visible over years, probably.
Yes.
Earlier, you also spoke about when you started your career as a young architect planner, how listening skills and empathetic communication and kind of dismantling some of our biases, and these were like very very crucial and foundational to the work that you've been able to do. Uh, my question is that when we think about urban development fields, and when we think about training the next generation of urban development practitioners, I think we still largely view the field as technical, right? So when and I went to planning school in the US, and I think their communication, consensus building, negotiation was a key course that I took, and I think it's foundational. I think there's this recognition that finally urban development practitioners are practitioners who kind of communicate with people, and you need a wider worldview, but you also need these skills of synthesizing, listening, bringing kind of competing priorities and opinions to a table, mediating, and these are absolutely crucial in this very complex ecosystem of cities. We have so many different people with so many different agendas, and I would like to believe everyone wants, everyone has a lens, but I think at the goal, we all want to improve Indian cities. Someone is just looking at it from different lens. Now, how do you think in our education, we can integrate some of these aspects, right? So how do we see that urban development is not merely seen as technical skills, but it's very important to also build these skills of empathy, listening, communication, argument building, like you said, has been so critical. Reading the room, these are all things which have been so crucial. How do we do, and do you see that? I mean, I see it, but I also want to ask you if you see that gap in how we see urban development and practice urban development currently.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the education. I think that the practice and the setup of a profession also then dictates its education, especially when we think of it as professional education. So like you, I also did my planning specifically in the US, and there I think consensus building or conflict resolution is an essential task of a planner. Actually, the planner is not considered as someone who comes with technical expertise, but when you work in a city planning department, you are just a bureaucrat. You're nobody special. You're just a bureaucrat with a particular set of skills. But your real big job is to mediate between city council members, which are elected representatives, and the people who come with all sorts of objections and all sorts of suggestions, and who may be obstructing certain kinds of development exercises. Here the planner is placed inside a powerful state, and it's coming from perhaps a more colonial sort of notion of a state, and the education in planning hasn't quite moved to the point where planners are seen for what they really do. But in practice, we know that planners are not all powerful, are not people who are technical magicians who come and wave the wand and everybody listens to them. Always sort of in drawing room conversations, and everyone who's a planner listening to to this podcast would know this. If you tell someone I'm an urban planner, and there's just this litany of stuff. What do you guys do? The roads are not fixed, there is flooding, there is this, there is that. So I mean, people are so befuddled. Why would you be an urban planner? Or what do urban planners even do if our cities are in a mess? And then you have to tell them that actually the urban planner is just a guy sitting there somewhere doing their thing, and decision makers are sometimes not technically equipped at all, and the whole story. But yes, coming back to communication, the whole policy practice space or the urban practice space is so much more than which discipline you come from, regardless of whether you're an urban designer or a planner or a policy practitioner. If you want to get the job done, meaning if you know through from all your learnings and consultation that there are these three or four right things to do that will fix a certain set of problems. For example, if we know that building footpaths and basic public transport is going to fix a whole bunch of problems, then we need to rally behind that issue. And for that, we all need to become better communicators. We all need to be able to listen better. We all need to be able to give space for multiple points of view respectfully, and yet be able to produce the right evidence at the right time to say we've heard everyone, but maybe this is the reason why this particular solution may be a good place to start. So be able to say all of that gracefully, with dignity, without offending people in the room, or be able to be negotiate yourself into positions of power where offending people in the room is also okay, because the outcome is important either which ways, depending on what kind of workplace or what kind of situation you find yourself in. Communication is key to all of it. It's everything. It's the memos you write, it's the letters you have to send, it's the notings on the file, how you read them, how you interpret them, how you respond to them. Everything matters, and it's not just in the urban field. I mean, the world is, as we were talking earlier, the world has become an over specialized place where everybody goes to school and gets these very specific set of skills. But in practical life, actually, there is a lot of lubrication that you need because you're dealing with people and you're dealing with real life contexts where things can go wrong all the time, and it's not always a technical fix that can take the conversation forward. So I think young people everywhere who work on their communication skills, whatever you're good at, take it and hone it. Or if you're a poor communicator, at least work at becoming a better communicator. I think it'll serve people no matter which field they are in, because we are going to have this problem of people sitting in silos, not being able to speak to each other to get the job done. We already have it, and it's only going to grow. And with the world of AI, one of the things that we can do to counter everything, or at least to cope and to adapt to a world of AI, is to actually dig into our human traits. And those are our human traits: empathy, being able to understand, having high cognitive ability, and being able to read between lines and not take everything literally. So those are all the skills that we have, and we should hone. And I think it'll make us effective no matter what discipline we are or what problem we're trying to solve.
Yeah, and yeah, that makes us humans, right? So communication is just so innate, to who we are. Thank you so much, Mukta. I think that was just the perfect ending, to this episode. I really, really enjoyed talking to you, and thank you so much. And all the best for your next 20 years, 30 years. And I think it's wonderful to see all of you, and this urban development practice, and how we are all working in our ways to communicate, to make a difference. So thank you
No,
so much.
absolutely. Thank you, Vani. I'm also really always following your work and what you guys do. And you have a lot of fans in NIUA, that I can tell you.
Thank you so much. I think
So every now and then somebody will say, they had done this and that was very cool. So maybe we can do something like that. So,
yeah, I think we just see our work as how we can amplify, how we can help real practitioners who are busy on ground doing things, to bring their work out and speak about it, and kind of connect them to the right stakeholders. I think that's where we plug in and see our role. But yeah, it's been fulfilling. Thank you so much, Mukta. Really enjoyed talking to you. Bye.
bye. Bye, Vani.
Thank you all for listening to this episode of Shaping Cities. I believe many of you would have connected with Mukta's insights. Communication, after all, isn't just the foundation of our work, but it's also what makes us human. If you enjoyed this conversation, please keep supporting us by following Shaping Cities on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. Stay tuned for more inspiring episodes and ideas for building better cities. See you next time.